Welcome to the Network Plus Prepcast, your dedicated audio companion for mastering every objective on the CompTIA Network Plus certification exam. This series is produced by baremetalcyber.com. In episode 142, we turn our attention to two of the most influential security models in modern network architecture. Security is not a single device or policy, it's a strategy, and effective strategies are built on structured models that guide how we protect resources, authenticate users, segment networks, and respond to threats. The Zero Trust model and the defense-in-depth approach provide the framework for building resilient, multi-layered, and continuously validated security environments. For Network Plus candidates, understanding these models is essential for answering high-level exam questions and for designing real-world defenses. Security models matter because they bring order and repeatability to otherwise chaotic environments. They ensure that security controls aren't applied randomly, but are instead part of a cohesive plan that accounts for user behavior, device health, external risks, and internal vulnerabilities. Whether you're building out cloud infrastructure, managing remote workforces, or securing on-premise data centers, models like Zero Trust and Defense in Depth help ensure you've covered all your bases. This episode focuses on the core philosophy behind each model, the technologies that support them, and how they can be used together to create more robust protections. The Zero Trust model is built on a simple but powerful principle: never trust, always verify. In a Zero Trust environment, no entity, user, device, or application is trusted by default, not even if it's already inside the network perimeter. Every access request must be authenticated, authorized, and continuously evaluated for risk. The assumption is that the network is already compromised, and only by validating every interaction can you keep attackers at bay. This mindset shifts how we build and secure networks. The exam will test your understanding of Zero Trust as a framework, not just as a single policy or tool. The core components of Zero Trust start with identity. Who is the user and what role do they have? Authentication must be strong and continuous. Multi-factor authentication, identity federation, and single sign-on systems are common tools. Device health is also critical. Is the endpoint fully patched, protected by antivirus, and compliant with configuration baselines? Continuous access monitoring rounds out the model, watching behavior throughout a session to detect anomalies. These pillars form the basis of Zero Trust implementation, and the exam may require you to identify which controls enforce each one. In practice, Zero Trust applies to networks by minimizing the ability of users or systems to move freely once inside. Instead of flat networks where all internal systems can communicate, Zero Trust emphasizes segmentation and granular access controls. Microsegmentation breaks down the network into very small zones with specific access rules. This limits lateral movement and contains breaches. Network access control systems enforce these boundaries, checking device health before granting access. On the exam, expect questions that ask how Zero Trust reduces risk within internal networks, not just at the edge. Compared to traditional models, Zero Trust represents a significant shift. Traditional architectures often trust devices and users once they are inside the perimeter. If a user passes the initial firewall and VPN check, they often receive broad access. Zero Trust, by contrast, continues verifying every request, even from authenticated users. It treats internal traffic with the same skepticism as external traffic. This model is particularly effective against insider threats and compromised accounts. The exam may include scenario-based questions that contrast traditional perimeter trust with Zero Trust practices. Enforcing Zero Trust requires multiple technologies working in concert. NAC, or Network Access Control, evaluates devices before granting network access. MFA ensures that user authentication is stronger than just a password. Identity providers like Azure Active Directory or Okta manage roles and provide authentication services. Centralized logging and policy enforcement platforms track every access request and evaluate it based on user, device, time, and location. Security information and event management systems correlate access attempts with known threats. On the exam, you'll need to match technologies like these to their role in Zero Trust enforcement. Defense in depth is another major security model and complements Zero Trust by focusing on redundancy and multi-layered defense. The idea behind defense in depth is that no single security control is sufficient on its own. Instead, multiple layers of security, physical, logical, procedural, work together to reduce risk. If one layer fails, the others continue to provide protection. This model is designed to address all stages of an attack: reconnaissance, exploitation, lateral movement, and data exfiltration. On the exam, you'll be expected to identify these layers and their individual roles in securing the network. The layers of defense in depth typically include perimeter defenses like firewalls, network-level protections like VLANs and ACLs, host-based protections such as antivirus and local firewalls, and application-level controls like input validation and encryption. Each layer adds a barrier or detection mechanism. User training and awareness, physical security, and disaster recovery planning are also considered layers. And these overlapping protections ensure that even if one control is bypassed, others remain in place to mitigate damage. The exam may ask you to identify which layer a control belongs to or which layer was missing in a described attack. The tools used in a defense-in-depth strategy are as varied as the threats they defend against. Firewalls prevent unauthorized traffic at the edge. Intrusion detection and prevention systems monitor traffic for known threats. Antivirus software stops malware at the host level. Encryption protects data in transit and at rest. SIEM systems collect and correlate logs. Backups and disaster recovery tools provide a last resort failsafe. User training and security policies provide the human element. On the exam, you may be asked which tool best addresses a given threat and where it fits in a layered defense. The benefits of layered security are both practical and strategic. They slow attackers down, forcing them to overcome multiple obstacles. They increase the chance that intrusion attempts are detected early, and they allow for containment, limiting the scope of a successful breach. If attackers get past the firewall, host-based controls may still block them. If they disable antivirus, logging systems may flag the behavior. Defense in depth doesn't assume perfection. It assumes failure and plans accordingly. This mindset is central to modern security, and the exam reflects that by including layered defense in multiple domains. For more cyber content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Zero Trust and Defense in Depth are not competing models. They work best when combined. Zero Trust provides granular, real-time access validation, ensuring that every request is verified and every identity authenticated. Defense in Depth adds redundancy through multiple security layers, offering protection at each stage of a potential attack. Together, they provide proactive and reactive coverage. Zero Trust stops unauthorized access at the front door, while Defense in Depth ensures that if something does get through, there are still controls in place to contain the breach. On the exam, expect questions that describe hybrid environments where both models are implemented in tandem. Network segmentation is a design feature used in both Zero Trust and Defense in Depth. By separating traffic into isolated zones using VLANs, subnets, or routed segments, organizations can contain potential breaches and prevent attackers from moving laterally. In a Zero Trust model, microsegmentation applies this principle even more aggressively, sometimes down to the individual workload or device. In Defense in Depth, segmentation is one of many barriers between attackers and high-value targets. The exam will likely ask you to identify how segmentation supports both containment and access control across different models. Dynamic access policies are a core feature of Zero Trust. Instead of static permissions, Zero Trust environments evaluate each session request based on current context. This includes the user's identity, role, location, device status, and behavior. Access may be granted or denied depending on policy rules or require additional authentication if risk is detected. This dynamic evaluation continues throughout the session. Unusual behavior can trigger re-authentication or terminate. These policies help adapt security in real time. On the exam, Expect questions that differentiate static access from policy-driven access control used in Zero Trust. Endpoint compliance is another critical aspect of Zero Trust enforcement. Devices that attempt to connect to the network must meet health criteria, such as current patch level, enabled antivirus, and encryption status. If a device does not meet these requirements, access is denied or restricted to remediation networks. This ensures that only known, secure devices interact with critical systems. Defense in Depth supports this by applying endpoint protection as one of several layers. The exam may test your ability to recognize endpoint enforcement mechanisms and how they work with identity-based controls. Monitoring and logging are foundational in both security models. In Zero Trust, every access attempt and session is logged and monitored to detect anomalies in behavior. If a user suddenly accesses unfamiliar systems or downloads large volumes of data, alerts are triggered. In Defense in Depth, monitoring occurs at every layer: perimeter, network, host, and application. CEM platforms and analytics tools collect and correlate logs to trace attack paths and identify compromised systems. For the exam, be ready to describe how logging supports detection, response, and forensics in layered security models. Zero Trust is often misunderstood. One common misconception is that it's just a firewall policy or that it only applies to cloud environments. In reality, Zero Trust is an enterprise-wide strategy that affects how identities, devices, and access requests are handled across the organization. Another misconception is that Zero Trust replaces traditional models. In practice, it builds on them by shifting the trust model from perimeter-based to identity-based. Organizations must deploy policy engines, NAC tools, and centralized identity systems to support Zero Trust. The exam may include questions that test your understanding of these misconceptions and how to implement Zero Trust effectively. You'll encounter multiple exam questions that reference both of these models. Some will ask you to match definitions with design examples, for instance, choosing whether a behavior-based access policy belongs to Zero Trust or if antivirus is part of Defense in Depth. Others may present scenarios where one model is clearly more appropriate. Be familiar with the definitions, the benefits, and the deployment considerations for each model. You should also be able to distinguish Zero Trust from traditional perimeter models and understand how they address different risks. In practice, implementing these models is not a one-time project. It's an ongoing process. As threats evolve, organizations must adjust access policies, strengthen authentication, refine segmentation, and update detection systems. The key takeaway is that security is most effective when it is both layered and continuous. Validate every access request, monitor every system, and apply security controls at every level. Whether using Zero Trust to challenge assumptions about who should have access, or Defense in Depth to build multiple barriers against attack, these models are essential to modern security architecture. To conclude episode 142, remember that Zero Trust and Defense in Depth are complementary strategies. Zero Trust ensures that no user or device is trusted without verification, while Defense in Depth ensures that no single control stands alone. Together, they provide a comprehensive framework that adapts to threats, contains damage, and ensures that even if one layer fails, others remain in place. On the Network Plus exam and in the real world, your ability to understand and apply these models will define how well you can design, defend, and maintain secure networks. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Network Plus Prepcast, your trusted audio guide to the CompTIA Network Plus certification. This episode was produced by baremetalcyber.com. For more cybersecurity podcasts, books, and resources, visit baremetalcyber.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cybersecurity Plus podcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com. And before you take the test, make sure to check out the practice questions in the book Achieve CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701 Exam Success by Dr. Jason Edwards. They cover every domain and are a powerful way to lock in your knowledge.